My name is Bree, and at 67 years old I thought I knew everything about my family. After 45 years of marriage and raising 3 children, I never expected my oldest son Travis to look me in the eyes during our Sunday dinner and say, "You're here because it's your house, but not because you're welcome." Those words shattered decades of what I thought were loving sacrifices. I sat there, forks suspended midair, completely speechless, as my family continued eating as if nothing happened. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own home. Trust me, what I discovered the next day changed everything. Frank and I met in the summer of 1978 at a county fair in rural Minnesota. I was 19 working at the lemonade stand, and he was 21 showing his prize cattle. He came to my stand every day of that week-long fair, and by the final day he asked me to dinner. We married just 8 months later on a snowy January morning. Our life together began in a tiny farmhouse. His grandparents had left him 30 miles outside of Minneapolis. We welcomed our first child, Travis, in 1983. From the moment I held him, that tiny bundle with Frank's blue eyes and my dark curly hair, I knew I would do anything for him. Travis was sensitive and thoughtful, even as a little boy. He would bring me wildflowers he picked from our yard and leave drawings under my pillow. When he was 7, he saved his allowance for 3 months to buy me a ceramic bird for Mother's Day because he knew I loved watching the cardinals outside our kitchen window. Our daughter Sophia came along 3 years after Travis. Unlike her brother's quiet nature, Sophia entered the world loud and determined. Our youngest, Liam, completed our family in 1990. 3 beautiful children, each with their own personalities and needs, but I made sure each one knew they were equally loved. Travis and I had a special bond during his childhood. Frank worked long hours at the manufacturing plant, often coming home after the kids were asleep. So it was Travis and I fishing at the lake behind our house, catching sunfish and talking about his dreams. It was Travis sitting on the kitchen counter helping me knead bread dough on Saturday mornings. It was Travis who I read to every night until he was 12. And finally declared himself too old for bedtime stories. I left my job as an elementary school teacher when Travis was born, returning only after Liam started kindergarten. Even then I worked part-time so I could be home when my children returned from school. I wanted warm cookies waiting, homework help ready, and an ear to listen to their day's adventures. Perhaps I overcompensated because my own mother had worked double shifts at the hospital, leaving me with a key around my neck and television dinners to heat up. I wanted my children to have what I didn't. Travis graduated high school as valedictorian and went to the University of Minnesota on a full scholarship. He studied engineering and met Heather during his junior year. She was studying education just like I had. They married a year after graduation, and I thought Heather was perfect for my sensitive son. They settled just 20 minutes from our home, and I was overjoyed when they gave us our first grandchildren, Aiden and Emma, now 8 and 6. For many years, our family remained close. Sunday dinners became our tradition, rotating between our homes. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, achievements, big and small, all together. But about 3 years ago, I started noticing changes in Travis. His calls became less frequent. When we were together, he seemed distant, checking his watch, making excuses to leave early. At first, I brushed it off as the stress of parenthood and his demanding job. But then came the canceled plans, the short responses to my texts, the way he would physically move away if I tried to hug him. I asked Frank if he noticed the change in our son, but he shrugged it off. "He's a grown man with his own family now, Bree. Give him some space." But maternal instinct told me something was wrong. I tried talking to Heather, who gave vague responses about Travis being busy at work. I even asked Sophia if she knew anything, but she seemed uncomfortable with the question and quickly changed the subject. The Sunday dinners remained our constant, though they grew increasingly tense. I would spend all day preparing Travis's favorite foods, hoping to see that spark of connection return. Instead, he would arrive late, eat quickly, and engage minimally in conversation. Heather would shoot him, warning glances, when he became too short with me, but she never intervened directly. That fateful Sunday began like any other. I had prepared pot roast, mashed potatoes, and homemade rolls, all Travis's favorites from childhood. Frank was watching football in the living room with Liam, who had driven up from St. Paul for the evening. Sophia and her husband David arrived first with their twins Jack and Lily. Travis, Heather, and their children came last 15 minutes after the agreed time. Dinner started pleasantly enough. The grandchildren shared stories about school, and Sophia talked about her recent promotion. When I asked Travis about his work, he gave a one-word answer: fine. I pressed a little, asking about a project he had mentioned the previous month. It's not interesting, Mom, he said, cutting his meat with more force than necessary. I just want to know what's happening in your life, sweetheart, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Travis put down his fork with a clank. Why, so you can find something else to criticize. The table went silent. Frank cleared his throat, but said nothing. Travis, I wasn't criticizing, I said softly. I'm interested in your work. That's when he said it, looking me straight in the eyes with a coldness I'd never seen before. You're here because it's your house, but not because you're welcome. Time seemed to stop. 67 years of life, and I had never felt so small. My own child, the baby I had nursed and raised and loved with every fiber of my being, had just told me I wasn't welcome in his life. At the table I had set in the home I had made, surrounded by the family I had given everything for. The silence that followed Travis's words was deafening. The only sounds were the scraping of forks against plates and the muffled cheers from the football game on the television in the next room. Frank shot Travis a stern look, but said nothing to defend me. Sophia, always the peacemaker, jumped in with forced brightness. So Emma, tell Grandma about your dance recital next weekend, she said, turning to Travis's 6-year-old daughter. As Emma launched into a description of her tutu and ballet shoes, I felt disconnected from my body, as if I were floating above the table watching the scene unfold. Heather, Travis's wife, was staring at her plate, her face flushed. She didn't seem surprised by Travis's outburst, which hurt almost as much as his words. Had they discussed me this way before? Was this how my son spoke about me to his wife? The grandchildren continued eating, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. Aiden was making a mountain with his mashed potatoes, while Sophia's twins were playing some kind of silent game involving facial expressions. The normality of their behavior made the situation feel even more surreal. I should check on the apple pie, I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. No one objected as I pushed back my chair and walked to the kitchen on legs that felt like they might give way at any moment. Once in the pantry, out of sight from the dining room, I leaned against the shelves and covered my mouth to muffle the sob that rose from my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of a shelf to steady myself. Tears streamed down my face, and I desperately tried to wipe them away, not wanting any evidence of my breakdown when I returned to the table. What had I done to make my firstborn child hate me so much? I searched my mind for recent arguments or criticisms I might have made, but came up empty. Yes, I had mentioned once that Emma's winter coat seemed a bit thin for Minnesota weather, and I'd asked if Travis was getting enough sleep because he looked tired. Were these comments enough to warrant such hostility? After washing my face with cold water and taking several deep breaths, I retrieved the pie from the counter and returned to the dining room with a smile plastered on my face. I'm sure it didn't reach my eyes, but I doubted anyone was looking closely enough to notice. Who wants ice cream with their pie? I asked, my voice overly cheerful. The rest of dinner proceeded with strained conversation. Sophia and David carried most of it, talking about plans for expanding their deck in the spring. Travis remained silent, never meeting my eyes. Whenever I looked in his direction, he would suddenly become very interested in helping Emma cut her pie or wiping Aiden's milk mustache. Frank contributed little to the conversation, which wasn't unusual. After 45 years of marriage, I was accustomed to his quiet nature. But that night, his silence felt like betrayal. Not once did he acknowledge what had happened or attempt to smooth things over. Everyone left earlier than usual. Normally, Sunday dinners extended well into the evening with board games or cards after dessert. That night, Travis was the first to stand, announcing they needed to get the kids to bed for school the next day. The others quickly followed suit, as if they'd been waiting for someone to break the unspoken tension. As I hugged each grandchild goodbye, I held on a second longer than usual, drawing strength from their innocent affection. When it was Travis's turn, he gave me a stiff, perfunctory embrace, his body rigid. Heather hugged me warmly but avoided my eyes. "Thanks for dinner, Mom," Sophia whispered in my ear as she hugged me. "Call me tomorrow, okay?" There was concern in her voice, and I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. After everyone left, Frank and I cleared the table in silence. We'd developed a rhythm over the years, me scraping plates and loading the dishwasher, him wrapping leftovers and wiping down surfaces. That night, the familiar routine felt hollow. "Are you going to say anything about what happened?" I finally asked as I rinsed a serving bowl. Frank shrugged. "Travis is just stressed at work. Don't make a big deal out of it." A big deal, I turned to face him, soapy water dripping from my hands. "Our son just told me I'm unwelcome in his life. How is that not a big deal?" "You're being dramatic, Bree. He didn't mean it like that." "Then how did he mean it?" I demanded. Frank sighed heavily. "Let's talk about it tomorrow. The game's going to overtime." He hung up the dish towel and walked back to the living room, effectively ending the conversation. That night, I lay awake long after Frank's snores filled our bedroom. I replayed the dinner scene over and over, examining it from every angle. Had there been warning signs I'd missed? Was this an isolated incident, or the culmination of long simmering resentment? I thought about calling my sister Joyce, who lived in Duluth. She'd always been my confidant, the one person who understood me completely. But it was too late to call, and besides, I couldn't bear to speak the words aloud yet. Saying them would make them real in a way I wasn't prepared to face. Instead, I slipped out of bed and went to the spare bedroom closet where I kept old photo albums. Under the soft glow of the bedside lamp, I paged through images of Travis's childhood. Travis on his first bicycle, grinning with a missing front tooth. Travis at 10, proudly holding up a science fair ribbon. Travis, as a teenager, awkward in his prom tuxedo with a corsage for his date clutched in his hand. In every photo, I searched for signs of unhappiness or resentment. All I saw was a normal boy growing into a man with the usual ups and downs that entails. Nothing to explain the contempt I'd seen in his eyes at dinner. By the time dawn broke, my eyes were gritty from lack of sleep, but my resolve had hardened. I would not let this fester. Frank might be content to pretend nothing had happened, but I needed answers. When I heard him stirring, I went downstairs and put on a pot of coffee. We were going to have this conversation whether he wanted to or not. The kitchen filled with the rich aroma of coffee as early morning light filtered through the curtains. I sat at our oak table, the same one where just hours before my son had delivered those devastating words. 2 mugs sat before me, steam rising in the cool air. I heard Frank's heavy footsteps on the stairs, followed by his predictable path to the bathroom and then down to the kitchen. After 45 years, I could track his morning routine without seeing him. "Coffee's hot," I said, as he entered, not bothering to look up. "Thanks," he mumbled, pouring himself a cup before joining me at the table. He reached for the newspaper I'd brought in from the porch. I placed my hand firmly on the paper before he could open it. "We need to talk about last night." Frank sighed, the same exasperated sound I'd heard countless times over the decades. "Bree, it's too early for this." "When would be a good time, Frank? After another Sunday dinner where our son treats me like I'm nothing. Or maybe after all 3 of our children decide I'm not worth having in their lives." My voice shook, but I pressed on. "Something is wrong with Travis, and I need to understand what." "He's just going through some things at work. You know how it is with young families these days, both parents working, trying to keep up with everything." Frank attempted to pull the newspaper from under my hand. I held firm. "Number. That's not it. This has been building for years, and you know something. I can see it in your face." Frank's eyes flickered away from mine, a tell I recognized from the few times he'd lied to me over the years. Like when he claimed to have forgotten our 20th anniversary, when he was actually planning a surprise party. "Frank," I said softer now, "please. This is our son, our family. Whatever it is, we can work through it together." He stared into his coffee mug as if the answers might be swirling in the dark liquid. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I may have said some things to Travis about you over the years." "What kind of things?" I asked, my stomach nodding. Frank shifted uncomfortably. "Just, you know, guy talk. Blowing off steam. Husbands and fathers do it." "What?" "Kind of things." Each word came out measured and deliberate. Frank's shoulders slumped. "I might have told him you can be controlling, that you criticize his parenting, that you've always been hard to please." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "You what?" I whispered. "It wasn't a big deal, Bree. Just complaints. Everyone complains about their spouse sometimes. To their children. About their mother." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Why would you do that?" Frank ran a hand through his thinning gray hair. It started when Travis was having trouble with Aiden as a toddler. He called me frustrated, saying he didn't know how to handle the tantrums. I told him about how you always had opinions on how I parented, how you thought I was too lenient with them. I never said that to you, I protested. Not in those words, maybe, but the implication was there. Frank wouldn't meet my eyes. Anyway, it became a thing between us. Travis would call venting about Heather's family or work stress, and I'd join in with stories about you. It made him feel better knowing he wasn't alone in his frustrations. Horror dawned slowly as I processed his words. This wasn't just once or twice, was it? This has been going on for years. Frank's silence was confirmation enough. What else did you tell him? I demanded. Frank took a long sip of coffee before answering. That you're judgmental of his choices, that you think Heather doesn't keep their house clean enough, that you've always had favorites among the kids. None of that is true, I pushed back from the table, unable to sit still with the anger building inside me. I have never played favorites with our children. Ever. And I've never criticized Heather's housekeeping. I've bent over backwards to respect their choices as parents, even when I disagreed. I know, Frank said quietly. His simple admission stopped me in my tracks. You know, what do you mean you know? I know you haven't done those things. Not really. I don't know Bree. It felt good to connect with Travis that way. He and I were never as close as you two were. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. You were jealous of my relationship with our son. Frank didn't deny it. When Travis was little, it was always mom this and mom that. You were his whole world. I was just the guy who came home after he was in bed half the time. So you decided to poison his image of me. To what, get back at me for being a present parent? The injustice of it burned in my chest. I was there because you weren't Frank. I didn't ask to be a nearly single parent while you worked 60-hour weeks. I did what had to be done. I know that here he tapped his head, but here he placed a hand over his heart. It still hurt. And then as the kids grew up and needed you less, I figured things would change between us. But you were always so busy with your classroom, your students, your book club, your sister. I had a life outside of being your wife, I said incredulously. That's healthy, not something to punish me for. I wasn't trying to punish you, Frank protested weakly. Then what would you call it? For years, apparently, you've been telling our son lies about me, turning him against me. If that's not punishment, I don't know what island. Frank's face crumpled. I'm sorry, Bree. I never thought it would go this far. It was just talk, just bonding with my son in the only way I knew how. Did you say these things to Sophia and Liam too? The thought made me sick. His hesitation told me everything. Oh my God. I gripped the back of the chair to steady myself. All three of them. You've been turning all of my children against me. Not turning them against you, Frank said quickly. Just commiserating. The kids would say something about you being too involved or asking too many questions, and I'd agree, validate their feelings. Their feelings based on what you told them about me. I was nearly shouting now. Do you realize what you've done? You've robbed me of my relationship with my children, with my grandchildren. I've tried to dial it back recently, Frank offered, as if that might help. Once I realized Travis was taking it so seriously, but by then it had become his truth. They all had this image of you that I helped create, and I didn't know how to undo it without admitting what I'd done. So instead, you let me sit here month after month watching my children pull away from me, wondering what I'd done wrong. Tears streamed down my face, now unchecked. Do you have any idea how that felt? How many nights I've lain awake trying to figure out where I failed as a mother? Frank reached for my hand, but I snatched it away. Don't, I warned. Don't you dare try to comfort me right now. What can I do to fix this? He asked, his voice small. I don't know if you can fix it. I don't know if I can. The magnitude of his betrayal was still sinking in. Decades of marriage, and I had never felt so deceived. I need to get out of here. I can't look at you right now. I stood and walked out of the kitchen, my mind racing. Upstairs, I pulled a suitcase from the closet and began throwing clothes into it haphazardly. I had no plan beyond escaping the suffocating presence of the man I thought I knew. Frank appeared in the doorway. Where are you going? To Joyce's, I said, not pausing in my packing. My sister had been telling me for years that something wasn't right with Frank. I had defended him every time. For how long? I don't know, Frank, until I can figure out what to do with the shambles you've made of our family. Please don't go, he said, his voice breaking. We can work through this. I'll tell the kids the truth. I'll fix it. I zipped the suitcase closed with finality. You've had years to tell the truth. You chose not to. I lifted the bag and brushed past him. I need space to think. As I loaded my suitcase into the car, Frank stood on the porch looking lost and older than his 70 years. For a moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Then I remembered Travis's cold eyes across the dinner table and my resolve hardened. I backed out of the driveway without a backwards glance, tears blurring my vision. At the first stoplight, I pulled out my phone and called Joyce. Hey sis, she answered on the second ring. Joyce. I managed my voice thick with tears. Can I stay with you for a while? Of course, she said without hesitation. What's happened? I'll tell you when I get there, I said. It's a 3-hour drive. I'll explain everything then. Drive safely, she said. I'll have the guest room ready. As I headed north toward Duluth, the familiar Minnesota landscape scrolling past my window, I tried to make sense of the last 24 hours. My world had been upended twice, first by my son's cruel words, and then by my husband's unthinkable confession. For decades, I had poured my heart into being a good mother and wife. How had it come to this? The drive to Duluth gave me time to process everything, though my thoughts spun in circles like the wheels of my car on the highway. By the time I pulled into Joyce's driveway, my eyes were swollen from crying, and my throat felt raw. Joyce was waiting on her front porch, a steaming mug in each hand. At 64, my younger sister still had the same bright eyes and determined chin that had gotten her through a difficult divorce and breast cancer. If anyone would know what to do, it would be Joyce. You look like hell, she said, by way of greeting, handing me a mug of tea as I climbed the steps. I feel worse, I replied, accepting both the tea and the tight hug that followed. Inside her cozy lakeside home, we settled in the sunroom overlooking Lake Superior. The November sky was gray, matching my mood, but the room was warm and filled with Joyce's collection of houseplants. Start from the beginning, Joyce said, curling her legs under her on the wicker sofa. I told her everything from Travis's cutting remark to Frank's shocking confession. Joyce listened without interrupting, though her expression darkened as the story unfolded. That manipulative son of a gun, she muttered when I finished. I always knew Frank had issues, but this is beyond the pale. I just can't understand why I said, fresh tears threatening. Why would he do this to me? To our family? Joyce sighed. Men like Frank, they can't handle not being the center of attention. You were a good mother, Bree. You were present and loving and involved. Frank resented that because it meant you weren't focusing all your energy on him. But that's so petty, I protested. We're talking about our children. I know. And that makes it worse. Joyce reached for a weathered photo album on the coffee table. Remember when I helped you move your mother's things after she died? I found this in her attic. She opened the album to reveal photos I hadn't seen in years. My high school graduation with Mom beaming beside me despite having worked a night shift just hours before. My wedding day, Mom straightening my veil with careful hands. The day Travis was born, Mom holding her first grandchild with wonder on her face. Your mother worked herself to the bone to give you opportunities just like you did for your kids, Joyce said gently. The difference is you had a partner who should have been supporting you instead of undermining you. I traced my mother's face in the photographs. I wish she was here. She'd know what to do. She is here in a way. Joyce tapped my chest. You've got her strength. You just need to find it again. We spent the afternoon looking through old family photos I'd brought along, reminiscing about happier times. There were countless images of me with my children building sandcastles at Lake Michigan, making Christmas cookies, cheering at soccer games and dance recitals. Look at these, Joyce said, pointing to a series of photos from Travis's high school graduation. Look at how he's looking at you. That's pure love and admiration. Frank didn't create these negative feelings out of nothing, Bree. He cultivated them slowly over time, twisting Travis's perception until he couldn't see the truth anymore. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. It was Sophia. Mom, where are you? I went by the house, and Dad said you left. She sounded worried. I'm at Aunt Joyce's, I said. I needed some space to think. Is this about what Travis said at dinner? Because that was totally out of line. David and I were shocked. I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "It's more complicated than that, sweetie. Your father and I are going through some things." "Does this have anything to do with Dad always saying you're too critical of us?" Sophia asked. "Because I never really saw that, but he would always tell me not to take it personally when you asked questions about the twins or our finances." My heart sank. "What else did Dad tell you about me?" There was a long pause. "Just stuff like how you always need to be in control, how you get upset if things aren't done your way. He said that's why you and Travis have been clashing, because you criticize his parenting." "Sophia, I have never criticized Travis's parenting. Not once." My voice was firm. "Your father has been telling stories about me to all of you, apparently." "What? Why would he do that?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." I glanced at Joyce, who was nodding encouragingly. "Listen, can you do me a favor? Don't mention this conversation to Dad yet. I need some time to sort things out." After we hung up, Joyce looked at me thoughtfully. "You need to talk to each of them. Let them see the truth." "But how? If I just deny what Frank's been saying, it's my word against his, and they've been hearing his version for years." "Then don't tell them. Show them." Joyce grabbed a notepad and pen from a side table. "What if you created something for each of them? Something that shows your love and support throughout their lives." The idea took root as we brainstormed. For Travis, I would create a memory box filled with items from his childhood, things I'd saved that showed how much I valued him. Letters he'd written me, artwork I'd kept, photographs of special moments between us. "And I know exactly where to start," I said suddenly, remembering the storage boxes in our attic. "Frank has no idea how much I've saved over the years." Joyce grinned. "That's the Bree I know, but you'll need to go home to get those things." The thought of facing Frank again so soon made my stomach knot, but determination pushed through the discomfort. "I'll go tomorrow when I know he'll be at his bowling league. I'll get what I need and be gone before he returns." That evening, I called Travis and asked if we could meet for lunch the next day. He sounded surprised but agreed to meet at Morty's, a diner he'd loved as a teenager. I was careful not to mention the dinner incident or my conversation with Frank. This needed to be handled delicately. After a restless night in Joyce's guest room, I drove back to Minneapolis the next morning. As expected, Frank's car was gone when I arrived home. I went straight to the attic and began searching through the labeled boxes I'd carefully stored over the years. The first box I opened contained Travis's childhood treasures. On top was a yellowed piece of construction paper with a kindergarten drawing of our family, all stick figures with enormous smiles. "I love my mom" was written in wobbly letters across the top. I remembered the day he brought it home, how proud he was of having written the words himself. Beneath that was a collection of notes we'd exchanged when he was in middle school. We had a special notebook that we'd pass back and forth, sharing thoughts and questions that were easier to write than say during those awkward preteen years. I had saved every page. There were photographs Frank had never seen, ones I'd taken during our special mother-son outings. Travis and I building his science fair volcano, the two of us at a twins game for his 10th birthday. A selfie from the day I'd helped him move into his college dorm, both of us teary-eyed but smiling. Most meaningful of all was the hospital bracelet from when Travis had his appendix removed at age 12. I had stayed by his bed for 3 days straight, sleeping in a chair, reading to him, and playing endless games of Go Fish. Frank had visited for an hour each evening after work, but otherwise left the care to me. I carefully placed these items and dozens more into a sturdy box, adding a letter I'd written the night before, explaining my side of things without directly accusing Frank. The box wouldn't solve everything, but it might open Travis's eyes to the truth he'd forgotten. By noon, I was heading to Morty's diner with the memory box beside me on the passenger seat, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. Whatever happened next would determine the future of my relationship with my son and perhaps my entire family. Morty's diner hadn't changed much in the 25 years since I'd first brought Travis here for chocolate chip pancakes after his Little League games. The red vinyl booths were perhaps a bit more cracked, the chrome fixtures a touch more dull, but the smell of coffee and maple syrup remained the same. I arrived 15 minutes early, settling into what had once been our booth in the back corner. Martha, the owner's daughter, who had inherited the place from her father, recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Anderson, haven't seen you in ages." The usual. I smiled, touched that she remembered. Just coffee for now, Martha. I'm meeting my son. Travis, how is that boy? Haven't seen him since he went off to college. He's 42 now, 2 children of his own. Martha shook her head. Time flies. I'll bring you that coffee. I arranged the memory box on the seat beside me, second-guessing my plan. Would Travis even care about these old mementos? Or would he see this as just another example of what Frank had labeled my excessive sentimentality? The bell above the door jingled and Travis walked in. He scanned the diner before spotting me, his expression guarded. He'd inherited Frank's height and my dark hair, though his was now sprinkled with gray at the temples. He was wearing a business casual outfit, having likely come from his office at the engineering firm. "Hi, Mom," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. His tone was cool, formal. "Thank you for meeting me, Travis." I pushed aside the urge to reach for his hand. Martha appeared with a coffee pot. "Look who's all grown up. Coffee, Travis." He smiled at her, a genuine smile that I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "Yes, please. Black." "You two want to order now or need a minute?" "A minute, please," I said, and Martha nodded, leaving us alone. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Travis fiddled with a sugar packet, not meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry about Sunday," he finally said, though his tone suggested the words were obligatory rather than heartfelt. "That's not why I asked you here." I took a deep breath. "I wanted to give you something." I placed the box on the table between us. Travis eyed it suspiciously. "What's this?" "Just open it," I said gently. Travis hesitated, then lifted the lid. His expression changed from skepticism to confusion as he saw the contents. He picked up the kindergarten drawing on top. "You kept this?" His voice held a note of surprise. "I've kept everything," I said simply. He sifted through the items slowly, his hard expression softening as he discovered each new memento. When he came to the hospital bracelet, he paused, running his fingers over the faded plastic. "I remember this," he said quietly. "I was so scared about the surgery. You stayed with me the whole time." 3 days, I confirmed. "The nurses tried to make me go home to rest, but I wouldn't leave you." Travis looked up, a flicker of the boy I remembered in his eyes. "You read me The Hobbit, the whole thing, and played so many card games that I dreamed of playing cards for weeks afterward," I added with a small smile. He continued exploring the box, finding the notebook. We'd shared photographs, he'd never seen birthday cards. He'd made me the program from his college graduation, where I'd circled his name and drawn tiny hearts around it. "Why are you showing me all this?" he asked finally. "Because I want you to remember who we were to each other. Before." I trailed off, unsure how to continue without mentioning Frank. Before I became such a disappointment, Travis's guard started to rise again. "Number never that." I leaned forward. "Travis, I have never been disappointed in you. Not once in your entire life. I have been proud of you every single day from the moment you were born." He looked away, but not before I saw confusion in his eyes. "That's not what Dad says. He says you always thought I should be doing more, achieving more. Your father is wrong." I said it simply without accusation. "I don't know why he told you that, but it's not true." Travis's expression hardened again. "So, Dad's a liar. He's been telling me for years about how you criticize my parenting, how you think I'm not strict enough with the kids, how you talk about me behind my back. Has that ever matched your direct experiences with me?" I asked quietly. "Have I ever criticized your parenting to your face?" Travis opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, thinking, "You made that comment about Emma's coat last winter." I asked if it was warm enough for the weather because I was concerned about her comfort, not criticizing your choice. "There's a difference, Travis." He shifted uncomfortably. "Dad said you complain about how I'm raising the kids, that you think I'm too lenient." "I have never said those things to your father or anyone else." I kept my voice steady. "Think about it, Travis. Think about our interactions, not what your father has told you about me." Travis fell silent, staring at the items spread across the table. His hand came to rest on a photo of the two of us fishing, his 8-year-old self beaming with a tiny sunfish held proudly aloft. "You were the one who taught me to fish," he said slowly. "Dad was always too busy." "Every Saturday morning in the summer," I confirmed. "You were so patient even when we didn't catch anything." And you came to every one of my soccer games. Every single one. Even the away games in Duluth. 4-hour round trip. Travis looked up, conflict clear in his eyes. Why would Dad say those things if they weren't true? I chose my words carefully. I think your father and I experienced our family life very differently, and I think he struggled with some things he never talked about. Travis was quiet for a long moment. Heather's been saying something wasn't right. She couldn't reconcile the mom I described with the grandma she saw with our kids. What do you mean? I asked. She says you're always kind and supportive with Aiden and Emma, that you never criticize or interfere. Travis looked troubled. She asked me once if I was remembering things wrong. Hope flickered in my chest. What did you tell her? That she didn't see how you were when we were alone. But he trailed off, looking at the evidence of our relationship spread across the table. But we're never really alone, are we? And you've never said those things to me directly. No, I said softly. I haven't. Travis's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me with new resolve. I'm calling Dad. Before I could respond, he was dialing. I sat frozen, uncertain whether to leave and give him privacy or stay and witness whatever came next. Dad, it's Travis. I'm with Mom right now. His voice was tight. She's showing me some things from when I was a kid. Things that don't exactly match up with what you've been telling me about her. I couldn't hear Frank's response, but Travis's expression darkened. No, I don't think I am confused. These are actual mementos, actual evidence of my childhood. Travis's voice rose slightly. Did you, or did you not tell me that Mom thinks I'm a disappointment? Another pause. And did you tell me that Mom criticizes my parenting to you? The longest pause yet. I see. Travis's jaw clenched. Well, we need to have a conversation about why you've been lying to me about my mother for years. I winced at the harshness of his words, despite my own anger at Frank. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Travis hung up, his face flushed. Travis, I didn't mean to cause a confrontation, I began. No, Mom. This needs to happen. He started gathering the items carefully, placing them back in the box. I need to talk to Dad alone. Can I take this with me? Of course, I said. It's yours now. Travis stood the box tucked under his arm. I need to sort this out with him. Then I owe you a conversation. A real one, without all this. He gestured vaguely interference. I nodded, understanding. I'll be at Aunt Joyce's in Duluth if you want to call or visit. Travis hesitated, then leaned down and kissed my cheek, a gesture so unexpected that tears sprang to my eyes. I'll be in touch soon, he promised. I watched him walk out of the diner, the memory box of our shared past secure in his arms. Part of me wanted to follow to be present for the confrontation with Frank, but I knew this was something Travis needed to do alone. The truth had to come from Frank's lips for Travis to truly believe it. Instead, I ordered lunch. I barely tasted, paid the bill, and drove to a nearby park where Frank and I had taken the children to play when they were small. I sat on a bench overlooking the playground, watching young mothers with their toddlers, wondering if any of them could imagine the complexities that lay ahead in their parenting journeys. 3 hours later, as the afternoon shadows lengthened, my phone rang. Travis's name flashed on the screen. Mom. His voice was thick with emotion. What did you do? My heart stuttered. What do you mean? Dad confessed everything. Every lie, every manipulation. He broke down completely. Travis's voice cracked. I've never seen him like that. I'm sorry, I said, though. I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. Don't be. I'm the one who's sorry. So sorry for how I've treated you, for what I said at dinner. He was openly crying now. How can you ever forgive me? Oh, Travis, I whispered, my own tears starting again. You're my son. I've already forgiven you. I don't deserve it, he said. The things I've thought about you, believed about you, all these years wasted. Not wasted, I corrected gently. Just complicated by misunderstanding. We can move forward now. Can we really fix this? We've already started, I assured him. That's why I showed you the box. To remind you of the truth that was always there beneath the confusion. There was silence for a moment, broken only by his uneven breathing as he composed himself. Dad wants to talk to you. Not now, but soon. He wants to make this right somehow. One step at a time, I said, not ready to think about reconciliation with Frank yet. Right now, I'm just grateful to be having this conversation with you. Me too, Travis said. Mom, I love you. I'm not sure when I last said that to you and really meant it. I love you too, Travis. I never stopped. After we hung up, I sat on the park bench until the sun began to set, watching the playground empty as families headed home for dinner. For the first time in years, I felt a lightness in my chest, a cautious hope that perhaps my family wasn't irreparably broken after all. The road to healing would be long and undoubtedly difficult, but the first step had been taken. As twilight settled over the park, I started my car and began the drive back to Joyce's house in Duluth. There were still conversations to be had with Sophia and Liam, still a reckoning with Frank that I couldn't yet imagine. But for now, I had reclaimed my son, and that was enough to carry me forward. 1 week after my lunch with Travis, I found myself sitting in Sophia's sunlit living room, nervously smoothing my slacks as I waited for everyone to arrive. My daughter had suggested her home as neutral territory for what promised to be a difficult family meeting. The tasteful gray and yellow decor reflected Sophia's organized personality with everything in its place, except for a few scattered toys belonging to her twins. More coffee, Mom, Sophia asked, hovering nearby. Since my revelation about Frank's manipulation, she had been solicitous, almost apologetic in her attention. No thank you, sweetie. I'm jittery enough as at Island. Sophia sat beside me on the sofa, taking my hand. Are you sure you want to do this all at once? It might be easier to talk to Liam separately like you did with Travis. I shook my head. We need to clear the air as a family. No more secrets, no more divided loyalties. The doorbell rang and Sophia squeezed my hand before going to answer it. I heard Travis's voice in the entryway, followed by Liam's deeper tones, then Frank's hesitant greeting. My stomach tightened. They filed into the living room, an awkward procession of the men in my life. Travis met my eyes and gave me a small, encouraging smile. Liam looked confused and wary hands shoved in his pockets. And Frank, my husband of 45 years, looked like he had aged a decade in the week since I'd left. His shoulders were slumped, his face haggard. Hello, Bree, he said softly. Frank, I acknowledged with a nod. Sophia directed everyone to seats, Travis and Liam taking armchairs, while Frank settled on the far end of the sofa, leaving space between us. The physical distance mirrored the emotional chasm that had opened in our marriage. So Sophia began, always the organizer. We're here to talk about what's been happening in our family. Mom, do you want to start? I took a deep breath. First, I want to thank you all for coming. This isn't easy for any of us. I looked at each of my children in turn. The truth is, there's been a misunderstanding, or rather, a deliberate miscommunication, that has affected how you all see me and our family dynamics. Liam shifted uncomfortably. Travis tried to explain some of this on the phone, but it didn't make much sense. Dad's been lying about you. All eyes turned to Frank. He looked down at his hands, then raised his head to face the family he had fractured. Yes, he said, his voice barely audible. I have been misrepresenting your mother to all of you for years. Why? Dad, Liam demanded. What could possibly be worth turning us against Mom? Frank flinched at the directness of the question. It wasn't that simple. It didn't start as some grand plan to create division. It was little comments here and there validating your frustrations about your mother embellishing, or even inventing criticisms she supposedly made about you. But why? Sophia pressed. Frank looked at me, a silent request for help I wasn't prepared to give. This was his confession to make. I was jealous, he finally admitted, of the relationship she had with each of you, with Travis especially, but with all of you. You all went to your mother first with problems, achievements, questions. I was secondary. Because you made yourself secondary, Travis said, an edge to his voice. You worked all the time. You missed games and recitals and dinners. Mom was there. Always. Frank nodded, accepting the truth of this. I know. But instead of acknowledging my own role in that dynamic, I resented your mother for having what I didn't. And over time, that resentment turned into these lies. So when you told me Mom thought my career choice was disappointing, Sophia asked, that was a lie. Yes, Frank said. Your mother was always proud of your decision to become an architect. She told everyone who would listen about your talent. And when you said Mom criticized how I was raising Jack and Lily behind my back, also a lie. She has only ever expressed admiration for your parenting. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Do you have any idea how that affected my relationship with Mom? How many times I held back from asking her for advice because I was afraid of being judged? I'm beginning to understand, Frank said, his voice breaking. The damage I've caused. It's unforgivable. What about me? Liam asked quietly. What lies did you tell about Mom to me? Frank couldn't meet his youngest son's eyes. I suggested that your mother thought your move to St. Paul was a rejection of the family, that she considered your decision not to have children selfish. Liam looked at me stricken. Is that why you always seemed uncomfortable when I talked about being child-free, because Dad told me you disapproved? I reached across the coffee table to take his hand. No, sweetheart. I have never judged your choices. I only ever wanted you to live authentically. Any discomfort you sensed was my own sadness that we weren't as close as I wished we could be, though I never understood why. Until now, Liam said, bitterly glaring at Frank. A heavy silence fell over the room. Decades of misunderstandings, resentments, and missed connections hung in the air between us. Travis was the first to speak again. I said horrible things to you, Mom, things I can never take back. We all did, Sophia added. Or thought them, even if we didn't say them out loud. I don't blame any of you, I said firmly. You were working with information you believed to be true. Information that came from someone you trusted implicitly as children should be able to trust their father. Frank flinched at my words but didn't dispute them. The question now, I continued, is where we go from here. I want to make amends, Frank said, to all of you, but especially to you, Bree. I've started seeing a therapist to understand why I did what I did, why I couldn't just talk to you about feeling left out instead of this. That's a good first step, I acknowledged. But rebuilding trust takes time, and I'm not sure if it's even possible in some cases. Frank nodded, accepting this hard truth. I understand. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes for however long it takes. Even if you can never forgive me, I need to try to make this right. I think we all need professional help, Sophia suggested. Individual therapy, couples, counseling for Mom and Dad, maybe even family sessions. We can't undo decades of manipulation overnight. I agree, I said. This is too complex for us to navigate alone. We spent the next hour discussing practical steps forward. Frank would continue his individual therapy. The children would each find therapists to help process their emotions about the situation. We would look into family therapy options for all of us, and Frank and I would. Well, that remained uncertain. Are you coming home, Mom? Liam asked as the meeting wound down. I looked at Frank, seeing both the man I had loved for nearly 5 decades and the stranger who had betrayed me so profoundly. Not yet, I said gently. I need more time. Frank nodded, pain evident in his eyes, but also understanding. Your mother deserves space to figure out what she wants. I've taken enough choices from her already. As we prepared to leave, Travis approached me. I showed Heather the memory box, he said. She cried. Said she always knew you were the grandmother and mother-in-law she'd seen with her own eyes, not the one I'd described. He hesitated. She wants to bring the kids to visit you at Aunt Joyce's, if that's okay. I'd love that, I said, my heart lifting at the thought of reconnecting with my grandchildren. Sophia hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything. Me too, Liam added, joining the embrace. As they held me, I caught Frank watching us from across the room, his expression, a complex mixture of regret, longing, and something like hope. There was a long road ahead for all of us, with no guarantee of where it might lead. But for the first time in years at least, we were all walking in the light of truth. When I returned to Joyce's that evening, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful, my sister was waiting with a glass of wine and an attentive ear. I recounted the family meeting, the tears and revelations, the tentative steps toward healing. And what about you and Frank? Joyce asked when I finished. Can you forgive him? I stared out at the darkening waters of Lake Superior, considering her question. I don't know yet. Part of me says 45 years is too much to throw away. Another part wonders if I ever really knew him at all. Joyce nodded, understanding. You don't have to decide tonight or tomorrow or next month. Take the time you need. Rediscover who Bree is outside of being Frank's wife and the kid's mother. Is it selfish to want that at 67? I wondered aloud. It's not selfish to want to be whole, Joyce replied simply. However long that takes. As I prepared for bed that night, I found myself thinking not of Frank or even my children, but of my own journey forward. For decades, I had defined myself primarily through my relationships to others, through what I gave and how I nurtured. Perhaps now was the time to discover who I was when I put myself first, what I wanted from the final chapters of my life story. It was a frightening thought, but also exhilarating. And for the first time since Travis's cutting words at the dinner table, I fell asleep with a sense of possibility rather than despair. 6 months can change so much, yet sometimes not enough. As I arranged fresh peonies in a crystal vase, sunlight streamed through the windows of my apartment, catching the edges of framed photographs on the mantel. Pictures of my children, my grandchildren, and new ones of just me doing things I never imagined at 68. Hiking along Lake Superior, taking a pottery class. Standing proudly beside a community garden plot I'd claimed as my own. The apartment was modest, but mine in a way my previous home had never been. Every piece of furniture, every color on the wall represented a choice I had made alone for myself. After 45 years of compromise and consideration of others' preferences, this space was a revelation. The timer on the oven chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. Sunday dinner would begin in an hour, a tradition I had reclaimed but transformed. Instead of the tension-filled meals of the past year, these gatherings had become something I looked forward to, filled with genuine conversation and connection. My phone buzzed with a text from Travis. We're on our way. Emma made you a painting. I smiled, remembering the last artwork my granddaughter had presented, a colorful rendering of the two of us planting flowers together. These past months had seen a blossoming in my relationship with Travis's children. Without the filter of misconceptions and resentments, I was free to be the grandmother I had always wanted to be, and they responded with an openness that healed parts of my heart I hadn't realized were wounded. The doorbell rang precisely at 4, and I opened it to find Travis, Heather, Aiden, and Emma all bearing dishes for our meal. Grandma Emma launched herself into my arms, a paper rolled carefully in her hand. I made you a butterfly, a monarch, because they travel far and then come back home. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, touched by the symbolism even an 8-year-old could recognize. Let's put it somewhere special after dinner. Travis hugged me next, the ease of our reconnection. Still something of a miracle. Mom, you look great. Pottery class agrees with me. I laughed, leading them into the apartment. Heather set a casserole on the counter. Bree, I finally tried your sweet potato recipe. I'm not sure I got it exactly right. I'm sure it's perfect, I assured her. Our relationship now one of genuine warmth rather than the strained politeness of before. Sophia, David, and their twins arrived next, followed by Liam and his new boyfriend Marcus. My youngest had come out to me during a long, tearful conversation 3 months ago, revealing that his reluctance to have children had been tied to his unacknowledged identity, one he had feared I would reject based on Frank's lies. About my rigidity and traditionalism. I always knew, Mom, he had confessed. But Dad told me how disappointed you were in Cousin Michael when he came out, how you said it was unnatural. I couldn't bear to see that disappointment directed at me. The fabrication had infuriated me anew, as Michael had been welcomed in our home when his own parents struggled with his identity, something Frank well knew. But anger had given way to gratitude that the truth had finally emerged, allowing Liam to bring his whole self to our relationship. The last to arrive was Frank, his knock tentative, even after months of this new arrangement. I opened the door to find him holding a bouquet of daisies, my favorite since our courtship days. For the table, he said, handing them to me carefully, ensuring our fingers didn't touch. Thank you, I said, stepping back to let him enter. Everyone's already here. Frank had been in intensive therapy since our separation, working to understand the insecurities and jealousies that had driven his destructive behavior. We had attended some counseling sessions together, painful excavations of the patterns that had defined our marriage. I had learned that my independence, which I had seen as necessary given his frequent absences, had triggered abandonment fears from his childhood with a distant mother. He had learned that instead of addressing those fears directly, he had chosen manipulation and division. Understanding didn't automatically create forgiveness, but it had opened a door to something like compassion. Whether that door would lead to reconciliation remained unclear, a question I deliberately left unanswered as I focused on rebuilding myself. Dinner unfolded with a natural warmth that still surprised me after so many years of underlying tension. The children shared stories from their lives, the grandchildren interrupted with their own priorities and perspectives, and throughout it all, genuine laughter flowed freely. Frank participated quietly, still finding his place in this new family dynamic, where his word was no longer accepted without question. After dessert, as coffee was poured, and the children moved to the small balcony to watch a passing thunderstorm, Travis tapped his glass for attention. "I'd like to say something," he announced, standing. "Tomorrow is Mom's birthday, but since we're all here today, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge something important." My heart quickened. Travis and I had come so far, but there were still moments when old patterns threatened to emerge. "6 months ago, our family was fractured," Travis continued, "not just by recent events, but by years of misunderstandings and misrepresentations that had twisted how we saw each other, especially how we saw Mom." Heads nodded around the table, eyes downcast at the painful memory. But Mom did something incredibly brave. Instead of accepting the story that had been created about her, she fought for the truth. She showed us with evidence and patience and love who she really was and had always been. Travis's voice thickened. And in doing so, she gave us all a second chance at being a real family. He raised his coffee cup. "So here's to Mom, the strongest person I know. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to." "To Mom," echoed Sophia and Liam, lifting their cups. "To Bree," Frank said softly, his eyes meeting mine, with an intensity that spoke of regret and admiration in equal measure. Later, as the family prepared to leave, Frank lingered behind. We stood at the sink, falling into our old pattern of him drying the dishes I washed. "That was a beautiful toast Travis gave," he said. "It was," I agreed. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined us being here. Frank set down the towel and turned to face me. "Bree, I know I have no right to ask this, but I need to know, is there any chance for us? Not now, maybe not soon, but someday." I looked at this man who had been my partner for most of my life, who had given me 3 wonderful children, who had also betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. The anger that had burned so hot initially had cooled, leaving behind a more complex landscape of emotions. "I don't know, Frank," I answered honestly. "I care about you, I always will. But I'm still discovering who I am outside of our marriage, and I need to complete that journey before I can answer your question." He nodded, accepting this non-answer, with a grace he wouldn't have possessed months earlier. "I understand. I'll wait however long it takes. I'm not giving up on us." After everyone had gone and the apartment was quiet again, I sat on my balcony watching the last colors of sunset fade over the city skyline. My mind returned to that devastating Sunday dinner that had set everything in motion, to Travis's cutting words that had shattered my world but ultimately freed me from a web of lies. The truth had indeed been painful to face for all of us. Frank's manipulations had cost us years of authentic connection. My silence and accommodation had allowed harmful patterns to continue unchallenged. My children's willingness to believe the worst about me reflected insecurities they were only now beginning to address in therapy. Yet facing these truths, however painful, had created the possibility of genuine healing. Not perfect healing, not complete restoration of what was lost, but something new and potentially more authentic than what had existed before. I had learned that it's never too late to reclaim your own story, to stand in your truth, even when others have worked to distort it. I had discovered strengths in myself I never knew existed, a resilience that carried me through the darkest moments of betrayal and loss. And perhaps most surprisingly, I had found that forgiveness, while not automatic or obligatory, could be a gift I gave myself as much as others. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for longer than I could remember. Whatever the future held for my relationship with Frank, for my ongoing journey of self-discovery, for my deepening connections with my children and grandchildren, I knew now that I had the strength to face it authentically. I had learned the most profound lesson of my 68 years: silence hurts more than truth. Living with unspoken pain, accepting others' narratives about who you are, sacrificing your authentic self for the sake of peace, these choices may seem easier in the moment, but ultimately exact a higher price than the temporary. discomfort of confrontation. Have you ever had to stand up for your truth when others were determined to misrepresent you? Have you found the courage to reclaim your story when it seemed easier to accept the version others created? If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment sharing your experience. And if you know someone who might need encouragement to speak their truth, share this video with them. Remember to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in life's most challenging moments. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the courage to honor your own truth no matter how long it takes.